Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Shri Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 47, and the text for today is 42. It's on the board, and we'll chant that responsibly. Api smarati ma sadho, Govinda prastute kvachit, Gosti madhye pura strinam, Gramya svaira katantare, Api smarati ma sadho, Govinda prastute kvachit, Gosti madhye pura strinam, Gramya svaira katantare, Api smarati na sadho, Govinda prastute kvachit, Gosti madhye pura strinam, Gramya svaira katantare. Please chant. Api smarati na sadho, Govinda prastute kvachit, Gosti madhye pura strinam, Gramya svaira katantare. And word for word. Api, moreover. Smarati, remember. Na, at. Sadho, O pious one. Govinda, Krishna. Prostate, brought up in discussions. Kvachit, ever. Gosti, the assembly. Madhye, within. Pure, strinam. Pura strinam, of the city woman. Gramya, village girls. Svaira, 3. Kasha, or I think it's the kata should be conversation. It's computer likes to try and convert it to English. Antare, during. And the translation for text 42. So this is one of the gopis speaking, since the series of 9 verses is each of the gopis saying something to Uddhava. O saintly one, does Govinda ever remember us during his conversations with the city woman? Does he ever mention us village girls as he freely talks with them? And the purport. The gopis were so completely in love with Krishna, without selfish motive. Thus, even in their great disappointment, they never considered giving their love to another. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti interprets their feelings as follows. The gopis might say, quote, surely Krishna has abandoned us because we deserve to be abandoned. Indeed, we are the most insignificant woman in the world and have been rejected after having been enjoyed. Still, do we sometimes enter into his memory on account of some good quality of ours, or even because of something we did wrong? Krishna must speak very freely with the city woman. He and they must sing, joke, make riddles, and talk about so many things. Does Krishna ever say, quote, my dear city woman, Your sophisticated singing and speech is unknown to the gopis in my home village. They couldn't understand these things." Close quote. Does he ever speak about us, even in that way? Om Gyanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurimilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupa Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaita Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyas Chakri Pasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Romapada Swami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll just read the two questions being asked by the gopis as they speak to Uddhava, or this particular gopi. O saintly one, does Govinda ever remember us during his conversation with the city woman? Does he ever mention us, village girls, as he freely talks with them? So this was Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the purport. And I thought we could examine carefully what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is expanding upon in terms of the gopis' thinking. So in his commentary, he has the inner mood of the gopis, and he's articulating their thoughts. So the first thought that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur expresses that this particular gopi is articulating is, surely Krishna has abandoned us because we deserve to be abandoned. Indeed, we are the most insignificant woman in the world and have been neglected after having been enjoyed. So to understand the thought, one can return to the time that the gopis arrived to meet Krishna. So this is to give some insight into this particular thought that's been articulated. So they're coming to meet Krishna after hearing his flute song. So that flute song is described as arousing romantic feelings. And it's described that the gopis' minds were captivated by the Lord. So the description continues that they went to where their lover waited, each unknown to the others, moving very quickly, such that their earrings were swinging back and forth. So that's a description that's given at that time when they're going to meet Krishna. So this is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:29-4. And at that time, Srila Vishwanath states that Lord Krishna instigated a terrible act of thievery when he played on his flute. That's how it's actually termed. So the song of the flute entered through the ears of the gopis into the inner chamber of their hearts. that wonderful music stole all their valuable possessions. So this is why Krishna's the sound of his flute makes him a thief. That wonderful music stole all their valuable possessions, and these were the possessions that were being stolen by Krishna. Their sobriety, their shyness, their fear, and their discrimination, along with their minds. And this all happened in a split second as soon as Krishna's flute playing began. So one could say that this music delivered all the gopis to Krishna. So some insight into the current statement of the gopis, or this particular gopi, that they deserve to be abandoned. It comes in the statements of Krishna, because this is how Krishna greets them at that time, because this is to get insight into where this thought is coming from in this particular gopi, what we're reading today. So at that time, this statement that they deserve to be abandoned, that we're reading today, it comes in the statement of Krishna, because this is how Krishna greets them when they come to him. He tells them, this is quoting Krishna, "This night is quite frightening. Creatures are lurking about. Return to Vraja, slender-waisted girls. This is not a proper place for women." Close quote. So the gopis' comprehension, this is how they're understanding, it's spelled out by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur via their thoughts. And this was their thoughts at that time, after they'd come in the dead of night, just upon hearing Krishna's flute, and the onus has been put on Krishna that he was the one performing the thievery of stealing their fear of the night, the darkness, which is what he's alluding to here. But this is how the gopis are thinking at that time, given by Srila Vishwanath. Alas, alas, even after shattering our family responsibilities, our sobriety and our shame, and enjoying us day after day, and after now dragging us here by the sound of his flute, he's asking us why we have come. They're very reasonable and completely insightful, understanding at what cost they've come to that particular spot in the darkness of night into the forest to meet Krishna. They're described as shattering their family responsibilities. Indeed, Krishna advises the gopis. So Krishna himself says this to them. "Now you've seen this Vrindavan forest, full of flowers and resplendent with the light of the full moon. You've seen the beauty of the trees with their leaves trembling in the gentle breeze coming from the Yamuna. So now, go back to the cowherd village. Don't delay. Oh, chaste ladies, go to your husbands and give milk to your crying babies and calves." So Krishna's very practical. So this is again in the 29th chapter of this canto, the 21st verse. So of course, as Srila Jiva Goswami points out, for the gopis, their supreme religious duty was to serve Krishna, who they viewed as their real lover. But looking at how Krishna is looking at things, he puts an emphasis on what is the highest religious duty for a woman. And this is what Krishna tells them. So quoting him, "The highest religious duty for a woman is to sincerely serve her husband, behave well towards her husband's family, and take good care of her children." So he outlines what's the highest religious duty for a woman. And Krishna adds, quoting him, women who desire a good destination in the next life should never abandon a husband who has not fallen from his religious standards, even if he is obnoxious, unfortunate, old, unintelligent, sickly, or poor. So there's no the woman's religious duty, it's very delineated. There's no option. It doesn't matter what the condition of the husband is. Yes, sadly, although actually, if I may comment, one often sees the husband abandoning the wife when the wife gets old. But in this particular case, the mention is that the wife has basically no choice because of needing to perform a religious duty. It doesn't matter if the husband's old, sick, he's an obnoxious person, terrible habits, but if he hasn't fallen from his religious duties, she has to remain there in her position performing her duty. Now Krishna adds a third principle. So this is all when the gopis have come into the forest at the sound of his flute. And Krishna adds the third principle to be followed by woman. This is what he says, quoting him. Petty, adulterous affairs are always condemned. They bar her from heaven, ruin her reputation, and bring her difficulty and fear. So the poor gopis are hearing this because they've actually chosen to put aside their husbands, their children. So he's pointing out what's going to be the consequence for them. Barred from heaven, reputation is ruined. You're going to have great difficulty. You're going to experience fear. So again, 29th chapter of this canto. Now, were this truly the position of the gopis, the principles to be followed for women would be applicable, perhaps making them fit to be abandoned, because that's what the statement is we're reading today. That, this gopi saying, we are fit to be abandoned. So based on what Krishna has said, that these three principles, religious principles for a woman that need to be followed, you can actually see the gopis right at that moment are not following them. They've cast those religious principles aside. But if you were to take them into account, you could say, as this gopi is saying, we are fit to be abandoned. But of course, one has to bear in mind Srila Jiva Goswami's comments in this particular section where these principles are being enunciated by Krishna to the gopis. He actually says that for the gopis, they see their highest religious duties to serve Krishna, their actual lover. So now Krishna does at that time also give a different principle that has been followed by the gopis through examining this behavior of their coming to the forest. And this is what he says. On the other hand, perhaps you have come here out of your great love for me, which has taken control of your hearts. So that's Krishna's statement. So he gives another option. Possibly, the reason you've come here is because you've got this great love for me, and it's completely possessing your hearts. So Krishna gives his view on this possibility, and this is what he says, quoting him. This is, of course, quite commendable on your part. Krishna is very charming. Since all living entities possess natural affection for me. Indeed, this loving devotion to Krishna is borne out, So that was his statement. And indeed, this loving affection or devotion to Krishna is borne out by the responses of the gopis when they hear Krishna's flute. And of course, Krishna has said there's this other possibility that their hearts have become possessed by their love for him. And you could see that that would be the accurate interpretation, because here's the description of what happens to the gopis when they hear Krishna's flute. They stopped milking and went off to meet him. And anyway, I have just commenting here. I watched a devotee one time milking a cow, a person who said he grew up with cows, a former temple president in New Jersey. And you could see that it requires quite a lot of strength and consistent effort, and it's very necessary for the comfort of the cow to relieve her of the very full milk bag. So that they just dropped it and left, leaving the poor cow obviously in some discomfort. Here's a description further. Some left milk curdling on the stove, and others left left cakes burning in the oven. So one knows it's certainly not a safe thing to leave something burning. So this was the immediate response. So it bears out this second possibility that Krishna has said, that their hearts were completely captured in their love for him. So it was with ease that they could abandon all these activities. Here's further. Some of them were getting dressed, feeding milk to their infants, or rendering personal service to their husbands. But they all gave up their duties and went to meet Krishna. So even in a state of undress, even literally dropping whatever they were performing for their husbands, or even for their infants, it was just dropped. I mean, it's quite a personal moment if a lady is breastfeeding a child or even feeding milk to a child, to suddenly drop the child. So that is actually what they did as soon as they heard the sound of Krishna's flute, because they viewed it that he was summoning them. So they responded immediately. Other gopis were taking their evening meals, washing themselves, putting on cosmetics, or applying kajal to their eyes. But all the gopis stopped their activities at once. And though their clothes and ornaments were in complete disarray, rushed off to Krishna. He has summoned them, their hearts are completely devoted to him, so it didn't matter what the external activities were, they were just dropped. So it would certainly be true what Krishna has said after outlining the three religious principles for women and then giving the other option. The other option was certainly the one that was the accurate one. So the gopis' utterance to Uddhava at this moment in time, that they've been rejected after having been enjoyed, we can see in a moment in the past times, because there is a moment where this does take place. There's this rejection. And this is the description. Sri Krishna went with the gopis to the bank of the Yamuna, where the sand was cooling and the wind, enlivened by the river's waves, wore the fragrance of lotuses. There Krishna threw his arms around the gopis and embraced them. So this is again in the 29th chapter of this canto, the 45th verse. And this is the description. He aroused Cupid in the beautiful young ladies in Braja. The gopis became proud of themselves for having received such special attention from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and each of them thought herself the best woman on earth. So there's actually, you could say, a meeting in person and affectionate movements performed by Krishna. I mean, an embrace. It's very close and personal. There's further description that, he touches the arm or a thigh, etc. But what the response of the gopis is, they start to feel very proud. Because they think, I'm the best woman in the world. And this is, each of the gopis have the same thought. And then comes that supposed rejection by Krishna, because you see it in his action. And this is how it's stated. Lord Krishna, seeing the gopis proud of their good fortune, wanted to relieve them of their pride and show them further mercy. Thus he immediately disappeared. So this rejection, even though in this verse we're reading today, the gopis saying, we deserve to be abandoned. According to the previous discussion, the 3 religious duties were not performed. Now the statement, we have been rejected, but this rejection is not factual, because Krishna was in fact increasing the power of their loving attraction to him by making this spectacular arrangement. By leaving them, we have what follows thereafter is the gopis' remembrance of Krishna, and actually composing these beautiful songs. So he actually didn't factually reject them, he increased their loving attraction to him. So naturally the rejection being referred to could also, in fact, be the time of Akura's arrival in Vrindavan, because that's another moment when you could say they experienced rejection. Because they were understanding that there was going to be an imminent separation from Krishna. So at that time, the description is that the gopis felt so pained at heart that their faces became pale from their heavy breathing. Which is understandable. Some great distress is coming, so the breathing is very heavy. Others were so anguished that their dresses, bracelets, and braids became loose. That's the description at that time. And then they asked, this is that moment where possibly they could have been experiencing rejection. And this is the question they asked. Still, do we sometimes enter into Krishna's memory on account of some good quality of ours, or even because we did wrong? So, that's today. And interestingly, there is a description given of Krishna's remembering persons in Gokula, because that's the question that's being posed today by the gopis. Do we sometimes enter into Krishna's memory because perhaps there's some good quality of ours, or even something we did wrong? And here's actually a description of what Krishna where Krishna is remembering Gokula. And this is coming from Sri Uddhava Sandesh by Srila Rupa Goswami in text 1. So here's the verse. Standing on the roof of his pastime palace, glancing at the city of Mathura below, a city opulent with a great canopy of flowering trees, and his heart now trembling, glorious Lord Krishna remembered the friendship of the people in Gokula's forest. So it's stated, he does remember. And he's standing in this spot where he's got a great vantage point of the whole of the city of Mathura. But what does the memory come? Of Gokula. So, And there's further statements that allow one to understand that Krishna does remember the gopis. So here's another one, also from Uddhava Sandesh. His lotus garland trembled as he sighed. Streams of tears flowed from his eyes, remembering and remembering the glory of the gopis' pastimes in love, and his heart trembling with longing. He became stunned like a painted picture. So indeed, there's constant remembrance on the part of Krishna of the gopis. And that's becoming stunned. It's actually a symptom of ecstasy. And we also hear that at that moment when Krishna was departing with Akrura, the gopis also stood motionless, like a painted picture, similar thing, that ecstatic emotion. There's also an interesting, just to answer this gopis' question of whether Krishna remembers them or does he come into his memory, Krishna makes a request to Uddhava. And this is also coming from Uddhava Sandesh by Srila Rupa Goswami, text 10. And this is that particular statement where there is an answer to this question being asked by the gopis of whether they come into Krishna's memory. So this is Srila Rupa Goswami. Krishna's statement to Uddhava, or his speaking to Uddhava. Dear friend, when their sufferings are as great as Mount Meru, the gopis do not suffer as much as when I feel a tiny particle of suffering. Therefore, please hide from them the unbearable suffering I feel in their separation. Tell them instead how I am bound by great ropes of love for them. So, unknown to the gopis, this is what Krishna tells Uddhava, that actually Uddhava must please even conceal from the gopis how he's experiencing unbearable suffering in the separation from them when he remembers their great love and the pastimes with them. So returning to the gopis, their thought is, and this was expressed in today's verse, Krishna must speak very freely with the city woman. He and they must joke, sing, make riddles, and talk about so many things. Does Krishna ever say, my dear city woman, your sophisticated singing and speech is unknown to the gopis in my home village? They couldn't understand these things. Does he ever speak about us in this way? This is what the gopis, the questions they're asking. But Krishna tells Uddhava about his feelings at being separated from the gopis. So his heart is completely with the gopis. And here's something of what Srila Rupa Goswami is writing. Handsome Krishna, who splashes waves of playful, crooked, loving glances at Sri Radha, now rides far away on a chariot. When I remember how the girls of Braja, so he's talking about himself, you know, he's actually speaking as though he's observing himself. So he says, when I remember how the girls of Braja spoke these words, my body became covered with perspiration, and I became stunned, standing motionless like a painted picture. So again, that extreme ecstasy that Krishna feels when he's actually remembering how the gopis are standing there as the chariot is pulling away. So Krishna reveals his feelings to Uddhava. Please do not, this is Krishna talking, please do not speak for a long time about what you all have felt. I know all about it. I know your sharp suffering has already broken my heart to pieces. You have drowned me in the great flood of your love, Because of your love, I'm now overwhelmed and bewildered, and I cannot pass even a single moment in peace. So the gopis are thinking Krishna, they're asking the question if he's joking and exchanging sort of playful riddles with the city woman. But here's Krishna's statement, what the factual reality is. And he tells Uddhava about it, that he's actually drowned in the great flood of the love of the gopis. And because of their love, he's overwhelmed and bewildered, and he cannot pass even a single moment in peace. That's the ecstatic condition of Krishna, but that's the factual situation. But of course, he warns Uddhava not to reveal it to the gopis. He doesn't want the gopis to know that his heart's broken in pieces. He doesn't want them to know he's suffering. So he actually advises Uddhava to, what he has to transmit to the gopis is just that how Krishna is bound in love with them. But the suffering part, he's not allowed to say. So that was in text 106 from Uddhava Sandesh, that particular understanding of Krishna's actual condition. Now, in terms of Krishna and his staying in the city, and hence revealing some of the stimulants of ecstatic love, being distant from his loved ones, the gopis, he says, "Oh, beautiful one." So he's actually addressing Srimati Radharani here. "Oh, beautiful one, you are fortunate. By speaking to your friends, many words fragrant with your great intelligence, you can throw your grief far away. Oh, goddess, thinking of you, I must stay in the city and do not see anyone before whom I can open up the seal covering the grief I suffer because of great love for you." So that's Krishna revealing his heart. So that was an exploration of today's verse, and since it's time to end with the exception of 3 minutes, if there's any comment or thought on this very extraordinary section, particularly having come across these statements of Krishna from Uddhava Sandesh, if there's any thought on it. Oh, please take the microphone because it's being broadcast. It's being broadcast, so people will like to hear.
Hare Krishna. So it's like a confusing one part, like God himself is asking something which is against the Shastras. So as a devotee, what you should follow? You should follow Shastras or you should follow what God's instructions? When you're in the middle of something, you don't know what to do. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. That's a very appropriate question considering this particular discussion, because in some sense it would appear that regular religious duties are being cast aside in favor of attachment to worship of performance of service for Krishna. But of course, the Krishna is still, in the end, he advises the gopis to return to perform their duties. So just based on that, the understanding would be that one maintains one's regular duties, simultaneously cultivating devotion to Krishna and performing all those duties with the thought that it's for the pleasure of Krishna. So it's kind of not having separation between regular religious duties and the performance of service to Krishna, but making them one. And in that way, one's entire life is moving in the direction of the highest religious principle, which is cultivating love for Lord Krishna. And the gopis exemplify the completely purified state of love for Krishna, and that inability to be separated from him at any moment. And so to come to that kind of one could say highest religious duty, and the perfection of one's highest religious duty requires the simultaneous cultivation of performance of one's regular religious duties. Thank you very much for your very nice question. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.